All right, everyone. Today we're moving into our third major disorder category in clinical psychology: impulse control disorders. These are conditions where a person struggles to stop themselves from carrying out certain actions, even when they know the consequences could be harmful. Think of impulse control like the brakes on a car. When the brakes are working, you can slow down or stop when needed. But if those brakes fail completely, you lose control over when and how you stop. That's the kind of difficulty we're exploring today, and it has a profound impact on people's lives. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me show you exactly what we're going to master in this lesson. Think of these learning outcomes as your GPS for today's journey. They'll keep us on track. First up, you'll understand what impulse control disorders actually are and the universal pattern that runs through all of them. Now, this might seem tricky at first, but once you see the pattern, it's like cracking a code. Suddenly, everything makes sense. Think of it like learning to recognize the chorus in different songs. Once you know what to listen for, you'll hear it everywhere. Next, you'll get your head around the three main disorders we're studying: kleptomania, pyromania, and gambling disorder. These might sound completely different, but they're actually like three different flavors of the same ice cream. Same basic ingredients, just different tastes. You'll also learn the specific diagnostic criteria from the ICD-11. That's the official manual doctors use worldwide. This isn't guesswork, guys. There are very specific scientific criteria that have to be met. It's like having a checklist to determine if something is actually broken or just needs a tune-up. And finally, you'll understand why this matters in the real world. We're not just studying theory here. These disorders affect millions of people and can literally destroy lives. Understanding this properly can help us recognize when someone needs help. Excellent! Now you know exactly where we're headed. Let me explain what impulse control disorders actually are. And this is where it gets really interesting. We all have impulses every single day, right? But most of us can control them. These disorders are what happens when that control completely breaks down. So normally, impulses are just urges or desires that pop into our heads, and we can choose whether to act on them or not. You might have an impulse to check your phone during class, or grab a chocolate bar at the checkout, or tell someone exactly what you think of them. But most of the time, you can resist these urges, right? It's like having a remote control for your behavior. You can choose which channel to watch. But impulse control disorders are completely different. These are irresistible urges to perform behaviors that are typically harmful to the person or others. The key word here is irresistible. It's not that they don't want to control themselves, it's that they literally cannot. Think of it like your remote control is broken and stuck on one channel. You can press the buttons all you want, but nothing changes. And here's the crucial bit. All impulse control disorders follow the same basic pattern. There's a buildup of tension and anxiety. Then there's the irresistible urge to do the behavior. Then when they do it, there's immediate relief and often pleasure. But then, and this is really important, there's usually guilt, shame, and often serious consequences. It's like a cycle that keeps repeating: tension, action, relief, regret. Then it starts all over again. So let's break down this pattern in more detail. Because once you understand this cycle, you'll be able to recognize these disorders anywhere. This pattern is absolutely fundamental to understanding all impulse control disorders. It's like the basic recipe that all these conditions follow, just with different ingredients. First, there's this building tension. The person starts feeling anxious, restless, maybe even physically uncomfortable. It's like having an itch that you can't scratch. It just keeps getting worse and worse until you can't think about anything else. This tension can build over hours, days, or even weeks. Then comes the irresistible urge. This isn't like, oh, I fancy a cup of tea. This is an overwhelming compulsion that dominates their thoughts. It's like being incredibly thirsty in a desert. Every cell in your body is screaming for water, and you can't think about anything else. The urge becomes so powerful that it overrides everything else. Logic, consequences, values, everything. When they finally give in and do the behavior, there's immediate relief and often intense pleasure or euphoria. For a brief moment, everything feels amazing. But then, and this always happens, there's guilt, shame, regret, and often serious real world consequences. It's like eating way too much chocolate. Fantastic while you're doing it, awful afterward. Now let's look at the three specific disorders you need to know about. First up is kleptomania, and I guarantee this isn't what most people think it is. This is way more complex and tragic than just someone who likes to steal stuff. Kleptomania is absolutely not ordinary shoplifting or stealing because you need or want something. This is crucial to understand. Normal stealing has a motive. You want the item, you can't afford it, you're angry at the store, whatever. Kleptomania has no logical motive whatsoever. It's like the difference between eating because you're hungry and eating because you have an eating disorder. The behavior looks the same from the outside, but the causes are completely different. People with kleptomania steal things they don't want, don't need, and sometimes don't even like. They often throw the items away or give them to other people immediately after stealing them. Imagine having an overwhelming urge to take something you don't even want. That's how senseless this disorder is. It's not about the object at all. It's about that moment of relief when the tension breaks. This is actually quite a rare condition. Only about 0.6% of the population has it, and it's more common in females than males. And here's something that might surprise you. Only about 4% of people caught shoplifting actually have kleptomania. Most shoplifting is just an ordinary crime, not a mental health condition. The second disorder we need to understand is pyromania, and this one can be genuinely dangerous if not properly treated. It's really important to understand what we're dealing with here. People with pyromania have an irresistible urge to start fires, and this is crucial. It's not for revenge, insurance money, to hide evidence, or because of any political or religious ideology. Those would be arson, which is completely different. Pyromania is about the fire itself, not about causing damage or making a statement. It's like the difference between setting a fire because you're angry and setting a fire because you're compelled to watch flames. People with pyromania are often fascinated by everything to do with fire. Fire equipment, firefighters, fire engines, fire alarms. They get genuine pleasure and relief from watching fires burn. It's not about destruction, it's about the fire itself. Think of it like someone being obsessed with trains, except instead of model railways, it's actual flames. This is even rarer than kleptomania. Only about 3 to 6% of psychiatric patients have this condition. It usually starts in the teenage years and tends to get worse over time if it's not treated. And sadly, about 90% of people with pyromania feel intensely guilty about any damage they cause, and more than 30% have suicidal thoughts.
Quick pause. If you're finding value in this explanation, there's so much more to discover at Alt Academy, where we break down every A-level concept with the same clarity. Now back to the video lesson.
The third disorder is gambling disorder. And this one's a bit different because it was recently reclassified. But we still study it because the underlying mechanisms are so similar. This shows us how behaviors can become just as addictive as substances like alcohol or drugs. In 2018, gambling disorder was moved from the impulse control category to addiction disorders because researchers found it works almost identically to substance addictions. But we're still studying it here because the underlying pattern is exactly the same as the other impulse control disorders. It's like how tomatoes are technically fruits, but we still use them as vegetables. The classification changed, but the essential nature is the same. This isn't someone who enjoys a flutter on the horses or buys the occasional lottery ticket. This is when gambling completely takes over someone's life. They gamble more than they can afford. They lie about their gambling. They choose gambling over important activities like work or family, and they keep gambling even when it's destroying their relationships, finances, and health. In the USA, about 4% of people will develop gambling disorder at some point in their lives. And with online gambling becoming more available, you can literally gamble 24/7 on your phone now. These numbers are unfortunately increasing. It's like having a casino in your pocket at all times. Now let me give you some concrete examples so you can really understand what these disorders look like in real life, because this makes all the difference. Let's imagine your friend Kate has kleptomania. This example will help you understand how bizarre and distressing this condition actually is. Kate walks into a shop feeling completely normal. She's there to buy milk, she has money, everything's fine. But then she sees a bottle of lotion near the checkout, and this tension starts building. She doesn't even like that bottle of lotion. She's got lotion at home, she could easily afford to buy it, but the tension keeps growing. The tension becomes overwhelming. She can't stop thinking about taking that bottle. Her heart starts racing. She feels anxious and restless. All she can think about is taking it. It's not about the lotion. She could care less about lotion. It's about this unbearable tension that won't go away. Finally, she can't resist anymore and takes the bottle of lotion. Immediately, there's this flood of relief and brief euphoria. But within minutes, she feels terrible, guilty, ashamed, confused about why she did it. She throws the bottle away because she never wanted it in the first place. Then the whole cycle might start again tomorrow. Let me give you another example to show you how different pyromania is from what most people imagine. Imagine your friend Marcus has pyromania. This will help you understand that this isn't about being a bad person. It's about having a serious mental health condition. Marcus becomes increasingly fascinated with fires. He starts watching YouTube videos of fires. He knows all about different types of fire engines. He might even hang around fire stations or follow fire trucks. It's like some people are obsessed with cars or football, except it's fire. Over time, Marcus starts feeling this mounting tension that he can't relieve any other way except by starting a fire. He might start with just lighting matches or burning paper in his backyard. The tension builds and builds until he absolutely has to light something. When he does, there's immediate relief and pleasure watching the flames. But afterward, Marcus feels terrible guilt because he knows how dangerous fire can be. He doesn't want to hurt anyone or damage property, but he can't seem to stop the cycle. This is what makes it a disorder rather than just dangerous behavior. He's trapped in a pattern he can't control. Now let's look at the specific diagnostic criteria that doctors use to identify these disorders, because this is more precise than you might think. The ICD-11, that's the International Classification of Diseases, 11th edition, gives us very specific criteria for diagnosing these disorders. It's not just someone's opinion, it's based on extensive research. All three disorders share the same core features we talked about: building tension, irresistible urges, relief upon acting, and significant dysfunction in daily life. But each also has specific criteria that make it unique. It's like how all cars have engines, wheels, and brakes, but a Ferrari is different from a truck. For any of these to be diagnosed as disorders, they must cause significant distress to the person or significant impairment in their social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Having weird thoughts isn't enough. It has to actually be messing up your life. It's like how everyone gets headaches sometimes, but you only see a doctor when they're interfering with your daily activities. Doctors also have to rule out other explanations, like substance use, other mental health conditions, or medical problems. This is really important because lots of things can affect impulse control. It's like how a mechanic has to check everything before deciding your car needs a new engine. Could be something much simpler. So why should you care about all this? This isn't just academic theory, guys. Understanding these disorders has real-world implications that could literally save lives. Impulse control disorders are more common than you might think. Overall, impulse control disorders affect about 5% of people worldwide. That means in a class of 20 students, statistically, one person might be affected by one of these conditions. You probably know someone who's struggling with this, whether they've talked about it or not. These disorders are often completely misunderstood. People think it's just lack of willpower or bad behavior. But that's like saying someone with diabetes just needs to try harder to produce insulin. These are genuine medical conditions that require proper understanding and treatment, not judgment. Without treatment, these disorders can destroy lives. People lose jobs, relationships, financial security, and face legal consequences. But here's the good news: they are treatable. Understanding them properly leads to better treatments and better outcomes. Knowledge literally saves lives. Now that we understand the concepts, let's see how it's measured clinically. Just like with other mental health conditions, there are scientific ways to measure and assess these disorders. It's not guesswork. For kleptomania, there's something called the Kleptomania Symptom Assessment Scale, or KSAS. It has 11 items, takes about 10 minutes to complete, and measures the severity of symptoms over the past week. It covers thoughts, urges, behaviors, and distress levels. Think of it like a thermometer for measuring how severe the condition is. Diagnosis typically involves detailed clinical interviews using the ICD-11 criteria we talked about. It's not just filling out a questionnaire online, it requires proper professional assessment. Just like how you wouldn't diagnose a broken bone from a photo, you can't diagnose these conditions without proper evaluation. And this is really important. Cultural factors matter enormously. Different cultures might express distress in different ways, and what looks like an impulse control disorder in one culture might be completely normal behavior in another. It's like how different languages have different ways of expressing the same idea. Now that we have discussed the structure and the purpose of the Kleptomania Symptom Assessment Scale, let's take a look at the kind of questions it includes to assess the symptoms. These questions cover both emotional and behavioral dimensions. For example, a typical question might look like, do you feel tense or anxious before you steal or when you have an urge to steal? Which covers the emotional aspect. These detailed, self-reported responses provide a more comprehensive view of the individual's struggle, which can be crucial for diagnosis and treatment planning. Let's bring it all together with a quick summary. I want to make sure you've got the key concepts solid. Impulse control disorders are conditions where people experience irresistible urges to perform behaviors that typically cause problems. They all follow the same basic cycle: building tension, irresistible urge, action and relief, followed by guilt and regret. Remember, these aren't choices, they're compulsions. We focused on three main types. Kleptomania involves stealing things you don't want or need. Pyromania involves starting fires not for gain or revenge, but for the fire itself. And gambling disorder involves gambling that takes over and destroys your life. Each follows the same basic pattern but with different behaviors. These disorders are diagnosed using specific criteria from the ICD-11 through proper clinical assessment. It's not guesswork or opinion, it's based on scientific research and careful evaluation. Cultural factors are crucial to consider in the assessment process. These disorders are more common than you might think, often misunderstood as moral failings or lack of willpower, but they're actually treatable medical conditions. Understanding them properly helps reduce stigma and leads to better outcomes for people who are suffering. That wraps up our introduction to impulse control disorders. Make sure you understand these core concepts because they'll form the foundation for everything we explore next about what causes these conditions and how we can treat them.
Hey there! If you found this A-level psychology lesson helpful, why don't you head on over to altacademy.org where you can sign up for the full A-level psychology course. In addition to psychology, we offered 7 other A-level subjects. Thousands of students have already taken the leap. What are you waiting for? I want to see you there.